everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for episode 14 of season 5 of the Revise and Resubmit podcast. I'm Dr. Kim Bissell, the Southern Progress Endowed Professor in Magazine Journalism and the Associate Dean for Research in the College of Communication and Information Sciences at the University of Alabama.
And I'm Dr. Annalisa Boland, an assistant professor in the Department of Communication Studies, also at the University of Alabama, and we both work in the Institute for Communication and Information Research, or the ICIR, at UA.
Today, we're catching up with one of our previous guests in the third of our What's New With series. And today, we're catching up with Dr. Cynthia Peacock, an associate professor in the Department of Communication Studies.
That's right. So when we last talked to Cynthia, we were all still on lockdown from the pandemic, and we were all recording from separate spaces across town, and sometimes we still do that. and Cynthia was telling us about the work that she had been doing in political communication. And with Thanksgiving coming up this week, I can think of no better topic than politics.
Absolutely.
But before we hear about all that, I have a question, because we always have questions. Okay, so hypothetically, Kim, how easy or difficult do you think it would be to be in a partner relationship, or maybe even a relationship with parents or relatives, when your political views are very different?
Such a good question, Annalisa, because we're going to be spending time with all of these people this week. So I'm not going to lie, and I don't want to call my parents out here, but basically I am. My parents and I have very different views on almost every issue. And over the different holidays, I would try to get them to see other sides of issues, but largely to no avail. They weren't budging, and neither was I. So how did we handle it? The super adult way. We just didn't talk politics. There were a few times when their TV would be blaring news from a channel that I'm not particularly a fan of, and I'd have to walk over and turn it off, and then I would get eye rolls from my dad. But short answer, we avoided political conversations. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? So let me now flip that question over to you.
Okay, so I'm the best at this question. I'm pretty passive when it comes to disagreement. So when politics is brought up, or even Auburn football is brought up around me, I feel immediately uncomfortable. And then I will do whatever I can to change the subject, remove myself, tell a joke, start pacing, start chattering. Suddenly I might need another cup of coffee. And oops, I saw something on my phone that I need to check. Like any of those things, or all of them, to not engage. And once this is a funny story, I was on a plane seated next to a flat earther. And like, even though I was wearing like the big headphones, I couldn't escape for like 2 hours of flat earth conspiracy. So I just sat there and nodded like I agreed. I don't agree. I know that the earth is round, and that we have a moon, and that we like made it to the moon. I also heard about that on that plane ride. So all that to say, I get very uncomfortable and try to change the subject.
Okay, so we're gonna see what Cynthia tells us in today's conversation. Maybe conflict avoidance and flipping the channel in a passive aggressive way are not the ways to approach it. We'll learn all about that today. We have the great opportunity to catch up with Cynthia on this topic and so many more as we get updates from her about her current and future research. So without further ado, we'd like to extend a very warm welcome to Dr. Cynthia Peacock. We are kicking off our third in the What's New With series, and we are thrilled to be able to catch up with Dr. Cynthia Peacock. Cynthia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. We are going to ask you a couple of questions. These are easy. Well, we know who you are, but remind us where you're from.
Sure. I am originally from Alabama and just moved around the state a little bit, living in Birmingham, Montevallo, Huntsville, Scottsboro, back again in Birmingham, now Tuscaloosa, with a short detour to Austin, Texas to get my PhD.
Well, roll tide to that. And tell us what you're doing right now. I mean, not like right this moment right now. In your professional life, where are you?
Well, I am basking in a newly minted tenure and promotion, and so that's been very exciting. And yeah, just trying to finish up old projects and starting new projects, and teaching lots of classes on political communication and gender and politics, uh, and co-directing the Office of Politics, Communication, and Media with Dr. Jess Maddox. And yeah, lots of fun things.
Okay,
Excellent.
so there's a lot going on. But before we dive into that, we do have kind of a fun question. What did the young Cynthia want to be when she grew up? Did you always see yourself being a professor? Did you say, "Yep, I'm gonna go get a PhD," or did you have another vision for yourself?
Oh, what a fun question. I think I went through a lot of different things that I wanted to be. When I was in high school, I thought that I was going to be a criminal psychologist.
Oh.
And I read lots of true crime books and really just saw myself as, going to be Jodie Foster, maybe. Yeah. And then let's see, what else did I want to be? And then I definitely thought that I wanted to be a photographer for like National Geographic or maybe Rolling Stone, either way.
Okay, those are two very, very good answers. So the last time we talked to you, which was almost 2 years ago, and it seems like maybe 5 years ago or 2 years ago.
Right.
Just time. We were talking about all the different things you had going on, and at that particular time, you were telling us about when you took students to the Iowa caucuses.
Yes.
So we learned a little bit about the research that you were doing now, and you've alluded to some of it just a minute ago. So tell us about some of these projects you've been working on.
Sure. So the Iowa caucuses, what a great time. That was just a real high point right there in the beginning of 2020 before there were not so many high points. Yeah, so still just studying political communication. I've maintained these sort of two areas of interest, one that has to do with news engagement, so news choice and sharing and posting and all of that good stuff. And then the very interpersonal communication side about political talk. And so sticking in that area, a couple of projects, Dr. Josh Peterson and I have an ongoing project where we are looking at politically similar and dissimilar romantic relationships. And that has been really fun and interesting. And we have one publication out and one that we're still working on there. So that's one area. And then I'm sort of carrying that on for a project that I just have designed to gather data on basically how our news use and social relationships sort of work together and intersect to form political opinions and kind of push us from attitudes into action.
Okay. So let's go to that first one.
Okay.
Should people be in romantic relationships when their political ideologies differ?
Well, I can only tell you what the data indicate, and the data indicate that people in politically dissimilar romantic relationships are less satisfied, and they do have higher frequency and intensity of conflict.
Wow. Like, so basically, if you are out there looking for love,
Right.
and you like you should just put your political beliefs out there, because that could avoid some challenge later.
Right. Yeah, potentially so. So there's kind of like the bright story and then the kind of darker story there, depending on how you want to look at it. So if you don't really care about politics and that's not something that you're interested in, then it's likely not going to matter that much. But for those who have pretty firmly held political positions, it definitely can influence your happiness in a relationship. Now, interestingly, for our work, because Josh is an interpersonal scholar and I do political communication, we looked at both outcomes. So we were not just looking at how it affects the relationship, but also how it affects your tendency to participate politically.
Okay. So
Yeah.
another follow-up question. How did you what method did you use for that particular study? Because
Yeah.
I feel like it would be really fun to do an interview and get the couple in the room and say, all right, let's see it, battle it out.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you that we had gotten data from both people in the relationship, and that's definitely a limitation. This one we surveyed, and it was a little bit more difficult than usual survey. Generally speaking, I'm trying to get the most generalizable population sample of the population as possible, right? So sort of like matching the demographic profile of adult Americans. But for this one, that's tricky because not that many people, as it turns out, are in committed relationships with someone with differing politics. So we had to quote a sample for this one, which meant, answering that question, do you think you're more similar or more different from your romantic partner? And then us quickly filling up on similar and having to leave the survey open for quite some time just to reach enough to be able to analyze data from people who were in differing relationships.
I feel like that's like a great, like, honey, I did this survey today, and boy, it was interesting. Like, that's one of those I would think that a follow-up would be very interesting to pursue. So are you continuing down this road of inquiry?
Yeah, I've since the beginning, since I started studying political communication, I've just been so interested in how our social networks and interpersonal relationships relate to our political engagement and activity and attitudes, because this is kind of what made me not go into political science, but go into political communication, is that we're social creatures, and all of these are sort of socially created attitudes and things that influence our participation and all of those things. So I think I'll probably always stay in this area because it's what I'm just so deeply curious about, and it's kind of like an endless opportunity. You can never run out of questions when you're asking things about relationships and politics.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
So let me ask one other question. Have you thought about how this extends into friendship groups? I'm reminded, so I've been watching The White Lotus, and one of the comments was like, they don't even vote. And so I wonder about friendships and political engagement and how that works out.
Yes, absolutely. And, I'm not the first one to look at these things, right? Like, I mean, lots of research and communication studies and, mass comm journalism, sociology, political science, all have sort of looked at the role of your social networks, like whether it's way back in the day, like opinion leaders, right? Or a two-step flow model. So we've always known that these relationships matter. And you're right, friendship is one of those relationships. So it's interesting to see different dynamics between those close ties and our weaker ties. So what difference does it make when we're talking about close friendships and romantic partnerships and, immediate family members versus weaker ties like folks you maybe work with or went to school with or you're friends with on social media? So all of the relationship does matter and the closeness matters.
Okay, so I have a follow-up to that, and it may not be something that you're studying right now, so you can just sort of wing it if it's not something you're studying. But following up on what you just said, what I'm wondering is, if you think about these relationships, whether it's with your partner or family or friends, and you do have differing political ideologies, is it better to just refrain from all communication with that person so there's not kind of a level of stress and animosity, or what should people be doing? And I'm asking for a friend here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that we all encounter, right? And here we are coming up on the Thanksgiving holidays, and inevitably you'll be sitting around a table potentially with family members who you love, but you just don't agree with on a lot of issues. So I have done work in that area. And the short answer is sometimes when the relationship is important, you kind of weigh the costs and the benefits and determine that it's better to protect the relationship than it is to be right in a political argument.
Oh, okay. I will make sure to let my friend know. Thank you.
Yeah, but you know that there's all these caveats, right? Like, what is this topic? How important is it to you? Does it affect your life? How close are you in this other relationship? If you're just going to see them once or twice a year, maybe, go for it, right? But it's really something that people have to weigh out, and it's something that people are thoughtful about. So in some previous research, when I asked people to describe situations in which they didn't express their political opinion when they wanted to or had one, um, a big reason was protecting those relationships, not hurting someone's feelings, not coming off as a jerk, all of those sort of interpersonal dynamics that help keep our social lives and families functioning.
I could that not coming off as a jerk.
Yeah, I see that. Like, I do. I want to say that. Do I want to say this? I don't know. Let's think. Hold on. How important is this to you? How important is this to me? Okay. Right. So I have a question. Does your knowledge and expertise in both political communication and interpersonal communication make its way into how your classes run? And are you able to like throw out like questions that could spark debate, but then kind of guide discussion based on how important are these things to me, you, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. And the two of you know me pretty well, so you might be surprised to know that I save those sort of heavier, maybe more conflict-laden interactions for closer relationships, smaller groups, and I really value harmony and respect in the classroom. So I am not likely to sort of drop a bomb and see what happens. Yeah, but I think you're right. I take into consideration, like, what do I value in this space with these people? And that's very different than if, the three of us go out after work one day, and I might enjoy like engaging in something. If we disagree about it, I would love to talk about it.
Okay, so I want to go back to something that you had said previously about kind of the bigger picture questions in political communication. So can you give us an example or two of, what it is scholars like you are asking now, or maybe kind of what we may see in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was fortunate enough to be in conversation with other faculty members that are members of OpCam yesterday, sort of having these conversations about what's important, what are the big questions now, because with political communication, it's so dependent on changes and shifts in technology and culture. And every 1, 2, 4 years, there are new questions because we're in a new environment. So right now, I would say two big areas really are about, the first one would be kind of the shift in an information environment. I mean, clearly people are listening to all the changes happening with Twitter. And although we're not all on Twitter, it is sort of functioning as this, type of a public sphere where people are able to, share information, interact, argue, do those sort of democratic things. So watching shifts in the online environment, which is really happening. I mean, some people are writing about this is, the end of the social media era and what's next. So that clearly has a big influence on political information, opinion exchange, engagement, all of that good stuff. The other one for me, and where I'm sort of focusing more energy now, is looking at pro and anti-democratic attitudes and actions. So that seems, like one of the most important things to be sort of paying attention to right now. So the project, even though I'm looking at similar variables like news use and relationships and interactions, I've shifted my focus now more to outcomes that have to do with anti-democratic sentiment and what can drive that sentiment into action.
Okay, so you've mentioned this OpCam thing. Had at least one other person who's involved in OpCam. Can can you tell us and our listeners a little bit about the value of collaboration? And is OpCam made up of just people in communication studies?
Yes, thank you for asking about OpCam. So the Office of Politics, Communication, and Media is probably my favorite thing that has happened to me since the last time we talked. It's a collaborative group of scholars, faculty, and graduate students who share an interest in politics broadly. And so to answer your last question, absolutely not limited to communication studies. We have folks from every department in our college and affiliates from around the university. So we think that is a real value. A lot of times, research offices, groups, centers can all be very homogenous, which is fine, right? It's a lot of people looking at a similar thing from a similar perspective. But what we have, which we think is really valuable, is a lot of different perspectives, both theoretically, methodologically, in just general interest. And so it allows us to really engage with the big political communication questions, looking at it from a lot of different ways.
Okay. Many questions here. So when you're talking, so based on what you've said so far, there are a lot of different ways to approach very broadly any research in political communication, theoretically, methodologically.
Yeah.
Some people are going to kind of fall on their preferences. So I know you had mentioned earlier when we were talking about your study with romantic partners, and you weren't able to talk to both. Is there like a preferred way or a better way, or is there value in seeing a variety of approaches and theoretical perspectives in the broader field of political communication?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of letting the method follow the question. And fortunately, I was trained in quantitative, qualitative, and critical methods during my PhD work. So I can understand looking at things in a lot of different ways. Now, I tend towards quantitative work because the outcomes I'm interested in, I want to be able to generalize. I want to be able to make claims, sometimes at least about, direction and causal order and what generally would happen if we have a set of variables. Like that appeals to me. So I fall kind of in a quantitative camp. However, there's some questions I have where I really need to hear people describe their experiences in their own words. So I've done lots of focus groups, interviews, content analyzed, open-ended responses on surveys, lots of content analyzing comment sections and news and things like that. So when the quality of something matters or the nature of content or interactions is important, it's important to be able to gather that data and analyze it. So yeah, I think it's super important to be able to do that. And with OpCam, such a great example of that, because we do have quantitative, qualitative, critical, historical. I mean, just people looking at issues from so many different perspectives. And that lets us understand something a little bit more deeply than if you just look at it in one way.
So I guess and this is not the final question, but one of the questions that I have is are we hopeful in the outlook of democracy and how we communicate about politics, how we're engaged, or are we worried?
That depends on like what day and what time of day you ask me this question, right? How concerned I am or how hopeful. But I think, yeah, it can be easy, especially if you study this stuff or if you're just super into politics, to feel really pessimistic sometimes, sad about the state of affairs, when you see that partisan animosity is at an all-time high, growing anti-democratic sentiment, people who just don't value American style democracy, the way that we unfriend, stop talking to, move away from people who don't share our exact perspectives. It can leave you feeling overwhelmed and kind of, not so positive about the outlook. However, I think there are plenty of reasons to feel optimistic about the future.
Mm.
And this can be from sort of a journalism perspective of saying, hey, we're having a real reckoning with what journalists can do, and should do, because of the nature of a very complicated media environment that, you know, whether it's quality or not quality, true or untrue, it's all has this sort of similar access across platforms. So there's a lot of people working very hard to make sure that our media environment is quality. Like, if you want it, then you can have that.
Mm.
So that makes me very hopeful. And then from a social side, I would say I'm hopeful when I see people interacting and keeping conversations going rather than shutting those down. So we have so many opportunities to curate a media and social environment that is just, you know, a nice bubble where everyone sounds just like me and they're just like me, and I don't have to interact with those others. But the reality is that's not the way a democracy works, and it's not, and it can't work that way, right? So there
Yeah.
has to be
Yeah.
interactions, even when those can be uncomfortable, right? And difficult. But from my perspective, they're imperative.
Mm.
So one of the things you said earlier was that there's this shift in the information environment and shifts
Yeah.
in the online environment, with regard to opinion exchange and engagement. And we see everything that's going on with Twitter right now. So if we see significant changes with Twitter or other online or social media platforms, what do you predict or project is going to happen in terms of the way opinions and ideas are shared? I mean, are we going to have to actually talk to humans?
Yikes.
I know. I mean, you catch me on some days and I'm like, would we just be better off if all of these went away? Right? Like, maybe. Of course, some of us are old enough to remember the really like hopeful beginning of the internet, like, oh, this is going to be, you know, the public sphere online and all barriers are down and we're just all going to, you know, interact and deliberate and make good choices.
Are you guys there?
Yeah.
Okay, we've lost her. I just wrote it the time.
Oh no, Cynthia.
Mindset, right?
Hey,
Then,
Cynthia,
oh, yes.
lost you for like 20 seconds.
Oh,
So-
no, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I can edit it together. So why don't you just, oh, shoot.
Oh, I don't even know what question I was answering. I was babbling.
No, you weren't about, it was great. We were talking about like what happens if Twitter goes away. So
Oh, yeah.
what I can do is, if you could just start a sentence again, if I need to like cut off a little bit of what you said before because it's redundant.
Yeah, I don't know where I was. That's fine. I can just answer more specifically. This was basically like, if there's no Twitter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna count us down. 3,
Okay.
2, 1.
Yeah. So even though Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, all these spaces give us a place to express ourselves politically, to this point, research hasn't really established that these are like productive, deliberative environments. So I would say, on the flip side, those interpersonal interactions, when people do talk to their friends, their family, and their neighbors, and build a sense of community and all of those good social capital things, that has so much more influence than just sending a tweet out into the ether. So whether Twitter stays or goes, et cetera, I think we would be misguided not to attend to our own more local surroundings and our interpersonal relationships.
You were so full of optimism and hope.
I say bring back MySpace. I mean, I want the background. I want the top 10 or top 5. I want competition like that.
It's so funny. I don't know if you've seen people posting like, wouldn't it be cool if you could put music on your Facebook page? And I'm like, that's just MySpace.
Yes. And it was so good. Okay, Cynthia, we are at the wrap up of this episode, but But before we leave you, we want to get some recommendations from you. Okay, so
Sure.
don't think too much.
Okay.
First, what's your favorite TV show, or what are you watching right now?
Right now, I'm watching Alaska Daily, and I'm also watching Casual.
Okay, that's the second rec for Alaska.
Alaska Daily, yes. What book is on your nightstand right now, or what do you happen to be reading? And it shouldn't be a workbook.
Yes, on my nightstand that is not a workbook is The Midnight Library.
Oh, I love that book.
All right, what movie do we need to watch, whether it's out right now or an oldie but goodie?
Oh, goodness. Well, we are big fans of watching scary movies all of October leading up to Halloween, but my kid is only 9, so I have to play it a little close to the vest. But we watched the very classic The Birds, and it really held up.
Goodness.
So I would say some of those older scary movies have made me happy lately.
Like that movie, I was not scared of birds until I watched The Birds, and I was like, this is like a real problem.
Yeah.
Okay, well, fun fact, my daughter was attacked by a hawk last year.
Oh my goodness.
She does have a bit of a anxiety related to birds.
Yeah, perhaps she should not watch the movie.
If your life were to be a reality show,
Oh,
what
goodness.
would it be? Or if you wanted to create a reality show about your life, what would it be?
Oh, I hope it would just be all about food. Like if I could just be on a
Oh, you
reality
could do a
show.
cooking class.
Well,
and your
you know what
son.
I want? I want the job of like Stanley Tucci or Gordon Ramsay, not where he's yelling at people, but where he's just sort of traveling around and eating and cooking and drinking wine, and that is the reality show I want to live in.
Absolutely. Cynthia, it has been so great to catch up with you. You have been amazingly productive over the last 2 years since we last chatted, and thank you for telling us more about what you've been doing. It's been great.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome.